Good time of day to you. Today we're going to talk about awareness, watchfulness, alertness, from ignorance to innocence. Take, for example, you're on your way home and you arrive only to find that your house is on fire. You may have been thinking about going to bed beforehand, but immediately you're shocked into a heightened state of alertness, absolute focus on the task at hand, and a presence that is preternatural. However, it's unfortunate if it requires a life emergency in order to enter such a state. So this will be about trying to obtain such a state without the need for disaster. Below our conscious is the subconscious, and below our subconscious is the unconscious. And our conscious is not reliable. It is polluted by society and is influenced by our upbringing and a multitude of factors. So connecting to the unconscious, bridging that gap between mind and body, is a pervasive theme in connecting with your inner self. And notice at the end of a dream, if you just wake up, you may only remember small fragments of what just transpired. It may have been going on for hours, yet even remembering a few seconds can prove challenging. This is the unconscious slowly transitioning into the conscious. And in that area of subconscious is where we get those fragments and memories. So it would be nice if we could tap into those without entering sleep and also losing consciousness. Love requires a balance of power. And yet, from evolution, from years and years and generations of men choosing smaller women when they have their preference, the large women have become quite rare. So there's a natural imbalance of power, even though we both genders strive to assert it. The sexuality and the will for power are not separate entities. And this was apparent since they don't allow soldiers to have their wives on the battlefield. It's because when you're loving and truly in love with someone, it's very difficult to fight. I know this personally because there's someone I love very much, and I find it has a calming effect on my being. The secret of harnessing the sexual energy has long been the domain of the monks, and their secret is to replace the sexual energy with spiritual energy, and all of a sudden God becomes their sexual object, you might say, which seems kind of strange. And according to Dr. Rosenberg, intimacy will always be better than isolation, but to each their own. When you fall in love with someone, you notice things that no one else notices about them. Personally, there's someone that I love very much, and occasionally, at the very end of a hearty laugh, there is a small snort noise that can sometimes be emitted. And it's adorable, and it sticks out like a sore thumb to me, even though I imagine most people would miss it. So building strong relationships requires seeing the bigger picture and building specialness beyond the initial honeymoon phase, where everything's amazing and you see someone as the whole bright side of the moon without the darkness. Eventually, you could just see them as an ordinary person, and it's that time when the relationship truly becomes something to work on, to build something that transcends the initial biological, chemical attraction that happens between all animals. It's on the subject of the monks and diverting their sexual energy towards God. When one of the first people translated the Omar Khayyam, He didn't actually know that the author wasn't talking about a woman. The way that the language was structured, it was very romantic and intimate. And he made the mistake of thinking that the author was talking about an actual woman, when in fact it was all about God. According to Freud, who was very obsessed with sex, all life pretty much is sexual penetration. Stabbing someone with a knife or even shooting them with a bullet would just be sexual penetration from afar. So, I mean, if mastering sexual energy can mean no need for weapons, and I imagine that extends to the verbal world as well. No need to have barbs in your words when much more communication can be achieved through calm dialogue, even if it's contentious, maintaining that air of respect. The subconscious is the field of dreams when we're in deep sleep. And in a coma, like deep sleep, the body takes over, body over mind. Most of the day, we want to assert mind over body. But at night, it is the domain of the body to take over. You'll notice that all the super important tasks that a human body does is not trusted to the mind. The breathing, the digestion, circulation. It would be pretty lame if that was all controlled consciously and we suffocated the first time we took a nap. Yeah, the mind can even be a hindrance when the conscious mind is stressed out or experiencing beta waves. Then we talked about Jung and his idea of how mythologies perpetuate from generation to generation and become part of this collective unconscious, which to me sounded very similar to Richard Dawkins and his idea of memes and intellectual ideologies persisting as essentially almost an epigenetic phenomenon. I guess would be a cellular phenomenon. Entering the collective unconscious is a kind of death. Jung was very obsessed with death, and he likened it to a light coming on in the darkness, and immediately one is blinded before eventually adjusting and seeing in the altered state. So whether you call it watchfulness, whether you call it awareness, whether you call it alertness, it can all be achieved through meditation. Because to go above consciousness, we must journey below. Thank you for joining me.